Hello and welcome to Talking Heads, a podcast brought to you by Buckinghamshire Business First. My name is Helen Shellabear and I'm the Managing Director of Shelwyn Real Estate, a Buckinghamshire-based commercial real estate business providing high-quality, affordable and flexible workspaces to the SME community within the county. I'm really excited today to be joined by Fiona Campbell, Head of Sustainability at Biffa Waste Management. Fiona has an extensive background in policy and public affairs across industry sectors with a particular emphasis and expertise in sustainability. Biffa is a local business with a strong heritage, having been founded over 100 years ago and now serving 95% of UK postcodes. Headquartered in High Wycombe and best known for their distinctive red bins, but they are laser focused on sustainability and do an awful lot more, as we will find out. So welcome, Fiona. Firstly, as you are fairly new in post, can you just tell us a bit about what attracted you to Biffa?
Well, thank you, and thank you very much for having me on the podcast today. Before I joined Biffa, I was actually working in the sort of health and life sciences sector, and so transition from pharmaceuticals into waste management might not seem like an obvious transition, but I was really attracted to the fact that Biffa was providing really practical solutions to helping companies and people up and down the country become more sustainable in how they live their lives and run their businesses. So that is what really attracted it to me. And also it's an industry that has gone under so much change. So 20 years ago, most of our waste as a country went to landfill. Now hardly any of it does. And as a sector, we're going to have to make that sort of change again over the next 20 years as we transition to a really truly circular economy.
And so could you give us an idea about some of those innovations that Biffa have implemented to sort of pursue that journey?
Sure. Yes. Well, I think, as you said, we're very well known for our red bins and our red lorries that collect those bins. And indeed, many of my colleagues will have been out today in the wind and the rain collecting those bins for us. But we do a lot more than that. And just one example would be, for instance, we work very closely with the dairy industry to change the way that your milk bottles are made and designed. So I don't know if you noticed, but if you buy plastic milk bottles, it used to be that they had a coloured lid depending on the type of milk that was in there. Now your milk bottle lid will be clear. And instead of the label being printed on or glued on, it will be shrink wrapped on. So that is entirely down to us working with the dairy sector to make their milk bottles as recyclable as possible. So now you will find if you buy your milk from the supermarket, one of these plastic bottles, about 80% of those bottles will contain material that's been through our reprocessing plant at Redcar. And it might not sound, it's not an innovation with lots of sexy new science and technology, but it was a lot of work put in by my colleagues to really make sure we could do closed loop recycling at scale.
That's really interesting. And I noticed as well that the lids are now more attached to the bottles somehow. And that sort of just happened one day and I just noticed it. Is that to do with the recycling as well?
Yes, that's right. And so that was a European piece of regulation. So any bottles that are manufactured over on the continent will arrive here with their lids tethered. And that's because the small bits of the lids would be getting lost sometimes in the recycling sorting. So now that they're tethered to the bottle, they will be picked up at our sorting facilities, and it makes it much easier for us to recycle. So again, not earth-shattering in terms of new technology, but really important, just challenging the way people have always done things and making some small changes to make a big difference.
And that's really interesting because there are so many design features, I think, which, as you say, to your point, just haven't changed in such a long time. I know Biffa's really keen on sort of social justice, and you've got a not-for-profit arm as well. Could you just tell us a bit about how that interacts with your main business?
Yeah, certainly. Well, I think it's something that people don't know about Biffa. We are very big in food redistribution. So that's hunting out food surplus in food manufacturing, catering, retail, and then buying it from the manufacturers and selling it through our community shop or company shop network of retail outlets. So we have one side of the business that is profit making. So we buy the food, sell it, and then we can pay that money back into the food sector. And it just demonstrates that there is a way of commercialising at scale food surplus redistribution. And then we've got a social enterprise side where food is donated and sold to a network of community shops. And so people have the dignity of choice when they go into these shops. It's just like doing their regular supermarket shop, but a much reduced price. And then attached to that, there's also a community cafe where people can go in and have affordable meals, and it can help tackle isolation and loneliness, but also somewhere where they can go and learn food skills to make use of the food that they could buy in the shop. And then allied to that, every single one of them also has a community hub where we help people look at some of the reasons why they've ended up in food poverty. And there are a number of schemes and training courses available to help people address those issues. So yes, very much giving back to the communities that the community shops are in.
And that's amazing. And the food waste point is huge. I think I was reading some statistics the other day about how much we throw away as a nation. I mean, presumably some foods are, you're targeting some over others, which are have longer shelf lives.
We take everything. We take fresh food. We take we always make sure that our community shops have a good range of fresh food, so we're always looking to source that. We take other ones of medium-term life, like bread, for example. That's an important one. One of the things we've been looking at lately is, can we sell loaves that are just made of the ends of bread from the food catering sector? Because if you've got manufacturers of sandwiches, they don't use the ends of the loaves, and can we do that? So we take everything. We can take food where the packaging is damaged or there's mistakes on the labeling. We can over label, make sure it's got the correct information on it, and resell. Or if you've had batches where a glass jar's broken, we can take that, clean it up, replace any labels, do the safety checks, and get that back out to consumers instead of it having to go to anaerobic digestion or the food or the animal food stream.
Wow, that's incredible. I love that, because I think it's a shame consumers don't know more about that, because I just never would have thought, about something as simple as the labeling being a little bit incorrect, and then that means that whole batch is effectively ruined and can't be sold, which seems ludicrous. But great to know that somebody else is taking advantage of that rather than it just going straight in the bin.
Absolutely.
And obviously we're a business organisation, Bucks Business First, very focused on businesses. And I work in the property sector, so I see a lot of people disposing of their waste every day. There's so many myths out there. I think could you maybe bust a myth for us about the waste sector, but also give businesses, like, what one piece of advice would you give businesses as to how they can improve their recycling rates in their own offices, or indeed in their own businesses generally, if they're producers of something?
One of the myths that we come across a lot is a feeling quite often that waste doesn't really get recycled when it's in the recycling. And I've seen it myself. I know if we get waste that is uncontaminated, and it's the sort of waste we're looking for recycling, and it makes it to our recycling sorting facilities, then we sort that waste again and again and again to make sure that we're getting all the valuable materials that can be recycled. They are and will be recycled. So that is an important myth to bust, because I think some people get a bit despondent about what's the point in recycling if nothing really happens to it. I think in terms of businesses, well, there is a big change happening for businesses in the waste sector in England, and that is simpler recycling that comes into effect at the end of March. I think the biggest bit of advice I can give to businesses is to make sure they're complying with this piece of regulation. So this is going to require businesses to make sure that they're presenting their waste in separate streams. So they have to present separated food waste, they have to present separated general waste, and also their dried recyclables in a separate waste stream as well. So I hope this will really drive up recycling rates, because it's an opportunity for businesses to have a look at, talk to their waste providers, make sure that they've got the right bins that the waste providers are going to be picking up that sit outside the building, but also to make sure that they've got the right receptacles inside their buildings and the right places for their employees, and they can train their employees in which waste streams need to go in which bins. And hopefully with food waste being collected very separately, it should help avoid and tackle some of these contamination issues that we sometimes have with recycling. That means, unfortunately, if a whole batch of recycling gets contaminated by food, it ends up in general waste and going for incineration rather than recycling. So I think getting on board with simpler recycling, talking to your waste provider early before we hit the final days before implementation are the best bit of advice at the moment for companies across the area.
Yeah, and definitely, I would add to that as a working in real estate is, businesses listening that think, oh, well, actually, it's not my problem because my landlord pays the waste bills and, I pay them through the service charge, but ultimately they're in control of the waste. Make sure you're asking them what they're doing about simpler recycling regulations, because, we're looking at it now and we're talking to everybody and, we manage the main big bins, but we can't be controlling what people do in their own offices. So it's definitely a huge area for collaboration and one which we are approaching with trepidation. But, hopefully, like anything, good communication and good signage and, maybe a bit of hopefully not too much telling off will help. And actually that brings us on to, Fiona, we've talked about this in the past, but some of the biggest challenges that you face in waste, and we've touched on this, but behavioural change. Do you want to just talk a bit about your thoughts around that?
Yes, absolutely. Well, one of the big challenges that the waste industry has had over the last few years is that recycling rates, particularly in England, have stagnated. And that is in huge part about trying to get people to do the right thing with their waste and put it into the recycling, not wish cycling, but putting the list of things that can be recycled into the right place at the right time. And one of the big challenges with being able to drive behaviour change has been that every single local authority across the country has had a different system for the materials they do and don't collect for recycling. So what our hope is that simpler recycling will really help start to tackle that issue with behaviour change, because we'll be able to give consistent messaging across England to say this list of materials can go in your curbside collections, and as long as you present that, your local authority will collect it, and people will also have separate food waste collections, again hopefully reducing that contamination. So simpler recycling comes in for businesses this year, but it comes in for local authorities, so that's your household collection waste in 2026. And then hopefully you will have the same system at work as you have at home and across the country, and so it'll be easy to understand, and companies like Biffa and other waste management companies will be able to put out consistent messaging that doesn't have to start with check with your local authority.
Mm-hmm. And so actually, yes, moving into the home then. So once and for all, pizza boxes and yogurt pots. What do we do? What do we do there? Because I do wash mine out, but there's obviously many arguments around these items and others.
It's a classic one we keep being asked about, and depending who you talk to in waste, you get a slightly different answer. What I personally do is I look at my pizza box, and if there's a bit that's really contaminated with the grease, I just rip that bit out, put that in my general waste, and put the rest of the box that's relatively clean into the recycling. But what we definitely don't want is any of those little pots of sauce or any food left in there. That's absolutely definitely what we don't want. Yogurt pots. So yogurt pots didn't used to be recyclable, but now with the change in packaging, a lot more of them have become recyclable. So wash them out, dry them off, put them in your recycling.
Okay, great, thank you. So I love a statistic. So could you give us either your most interesting or your most shocking statistic that listeners might find interesting?
Plenty in the waste sector, but probably I think maybe is that in the UK we still, each person throws away about 400 kilograms of waste a year. So I'm reliably informed that is the size of a fully grown polar bear, and that polar bears are very heavy. I don't know which of my colleagues went and verified this, but it's a lot of waste. So we need to make sure that we are thinking about how we dispose of it. Preferably how we reduce it, but certainly once it's there, how we dispose of it so that it's got its highest chance of either being repaired, reused, or recycled.
Mm-hmm. No, great. And I think, we're definitely very focused on general waste reduction in our house, just to try and, make sure our bins aren't overflowing every time they're collected. So you and I have both been involved with the Green Schools Challenge, organised by BBF and the Buck Skills Hub. And for anyone listening who doesn't know what the Green Schools Challenge is, it was a challenge between 5 or 6 local schools in Buckinghamshire. It was a Dragon's Den style setup where they were given 2 or 3 separate sort of full days with business mentors, of which Fiona was one and I was one, to come up with an idea to make savings in money or carbon, or ideally both, at their school or college site. I've done it 2 years running, so I've absolutely loved it. Fiona, this was your first year, so kind of what drew you to get involved with that, and what would you say to anyone else who was approached by BBF and thinking about getting involved?
Well, first of all, I think it's fantastic that students are now properly learning about the planet and the environment and what we need to be doing to be living within our planetary boundaries. But I think it can sometimes be really overwhelming, and it can create quite a sense of despondency in pupils if they're not then given some opportunity to then make a difference and have a bit of agency in making some change. So I think programs like this are really important for giving students, so empowering them to realise that they can make the change. I also think when you work professionally in sustainability, you can sometimes get quite into the detail of how you're measuring your carbon footprint and what KPIs you're reporting against and how best to do it. And I think personally, for me, it was great to be able to just take a step back and go back to what sustainability is at its core, which is looking up, looking around, looking at how things are done, and then challenging how that's done and questioning if it could be done better in a whole manner of ways. And I think some of my favourite examples for the entries from the students were those examples where it didn't really need to take that much investment. It was about challenging how things had always been done and saying, hang on, we've got a better idea of how to do this. Let's do it. And some of them were so implementable because of that reason. And Biffa is all about challenging people to think about waste differently. So it's a really good opportunity as well to get out into schools and show people that even once something is a waste product, you can think differently about it and do something different with it.
Yeah, your team had a fantastic idea, and I think I personally love those moments early on in the process in the project where the students are sitting there and they're thinking suddenly about all the different things that they've never thought about before, like where does the uneaten food go from the canteen, or where does the waste go when we put it in a box that says recycling, and seeing those aha moments where they think about it and they haven't thought about it before. And I think that's probably a good lesson that we all need to take through into life generally, is, as you say, just to always question things. So I guess
good opportunity. Oh, sorry.
No, after you.
And I think they also appreciated meeting one of my colleagues at Biffa. He's a bit earlier in his career than me, and that opportunity to find out some of the roles that are available as they move through their education and their career.
Definitely. Well, waste isn't going anywhere. So
Exactly.
I imagine that the waste sector has huge opportunities. So actually, I suppose moving back into the industry then, what future trends are impacting the waste sector at the moment?
We are coming up to a point where a lot of policy, like simpler recycling, that's been a long time in the coming, is starting to be implemented. So we're starting to now to look at what comes next. And I think there's a few trends that I'm really hoping to see. The government's setting up a circular economy task force. And I really hope that this is going to turbocharge and really push a trend that we've started to see happening, which is for people to start designing circularity into products from the beginning, so that they're not just thinking about what does it look like, how well does it perform for the customer, but how, when it comes to the end of the use from that first customer, how can it be repaired, remanufactured, or ultimately reused or recycled. And that gets built in from the beginning, because once something's in the bin, there's limited, there will always be limited options. But if we can design circularity in at the beginning, then I think that would be good. And another thing I mentioned before with the milk bottles and scaling food redistribution is that we need to be able to really pushing at scale for some circular solutions. There's lots of great examples of people taking hard to recycle materials and upcycling and turning them into fantastic new products, giving them a second lease of life. But they're at small scale and they're never at that rate going to address the size of the challenge we have. So I hope that we're going to start to see some solutions really scaling on what you do with the hard to recycle materials. And also, I think data is going to radically alter perhaps how we see waste, because we are seeing a lot of technology coming through that's going to give brands and retailers for the first time the ability to sort of track where their materials might end up in a system. That's going to give them a lot better data for making decisions, but also perhaps ultimately empower consumers to make different choices based on data-backed green claims.
I would really hope that the fashion industry take heed of that data. And, I walked into a shop that shall remain nameless a couple of weeks ago, and just the sheer amount of clothing, and you just think, you're not going to sell all of that. So what's going to happen to what you can't sell? But hopefully that data will allow them to only produce, a certain amount that they know they will sell.
Yeah, and textiles has got big challenges for, how do we start to create the market as happened in plastics for the recycled material.
I'm so interested. I mean, we could do a whole other podcast on that. This year I'm doing Tiffany Dark's rule of 5. So you're only allowed to buy 5 new items in the whole year. So I've bought one already. So I don't know, it's January, which isn't great, but hopefully I'll achieve it.
Good luck. I admire you greatly, and I think even if you don't quite manage it, having become more conscious and mindful in purchasing, I think that sounds like a very good idea.
And it's good fun so far. So I definitely recommend everybody look it up. And I've patched up a pair of jeans, so already I'm feeling the good vibes from having got my sewing kit out. So Fiona, which disposed of item is the biggest bugbear to waste companies?
Oh, I'm glad you asked me that. I think that has to be when we have electronics put into general waste or into the general recycling, because it's causing a lot of fires in the waste sector. So whether that's on our trucks or at a recycling facility or a waste processing facility, obviously that's quite a dangerous thing for our crews and our staff and also the public to be put at risk, because if something, particularly if they contain a battery in them and they get crushed, it's starting fires, unfortunately. So I think if we could wish for one thing to be taken out of the waste, that would be that.
And just without wishing to sort of teach everybody to suck eggs, so could you just give us a really quick list of the top kind of 5 electronic items to avoid putting in your rubbish?
It's the small electrical items that perhaps people don't think about, like disposable vapes, and I think things like if your electric toothbrush from the bathroom once that's finished, those sort of small personal electric items. And certainly there can be value in some of them, so definitely don't be putting mobile phones or anything like that in. You might be able to resell those.
And where should people be taking their electronic waste?
It depends on where you live. So some local authorities do have curbside collections of WEEE. Usually you put them in a small container out with your regular recycling. But in other areas, you either need to take it to your local recycling facility, or some shops also offer a take-back scheme for if you're buying new electricals in those shops, you can return your old ones.
And actually, potentially a little known fact for Buckinghamshire residents, but if you put your batteries into a little plastic bag and tie a knot on it and put it on top of your general waste bin, it will be taken away when your waste is collected. But obviously don't put it in the bin, just put it on top of the bin. And I've only just moved to Buckinghamshire, so I'm newbie in learning all the facts, so that might be one that some people don't know. Just to finish then, really, what would you like listeners to take away, either from a personal perspective or a business perspective, as to how individually and collectively we can support Biffa's mission? Because I mean, it's incredible what Biffa's doing, and I encourage everybody listening to have a look at their website, because you guys are just so much more than just the bin collection. So what would you like everybody to take away from today, Fiona?
Well, I think when it comes to a personal point of view is that, I get how difficult it is to reduce your waste. I mean, I take my reusable coffee cup everywhere, but still forget it sometimes. I always on my lookout for ways that I can reduce my packaging waste. But I'd say one of the key things that people can do is to use their consumer power and look for products that have got high content of recycled material in it, for products that have been created with reuse in mind, or indeed recycling. So if you're looking for packaging that can be reliably and easily recycled, you're looking for things that are made of one material, so not the cardboard boxes that are lined with plastic, but just a single material. If you've got a clear undyed cap on your bottle, it means it's going more likely to be more easily recyclable. Or you've got your label shrink wrapped on rather than glued on. All of these little things that, if we use our consumer power to encourage companies to do the right thing by packaging, and hopefully we might drive some change there.
That's a brilliant example, because I think there's a lot of people out there that read the packaging for the ingredients. So it's only really one tiny little step further to actually look at what the packaging's made of and pay attention to the recycling logos on it and whatnot. So no, thank you, Fiona. That's been really, really interesting. And I think perhaps maybe closer to the time, a separate webinar on simpler recycling might be really handy as well.
Happy to dive into the detail of simpler recycling or any other recycling policy like extended producer responsibility, any of those, right up my street.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.